They said this would be a historic day for UK-US relations. But as the red carpet was rolled out for Donald Trump's state visit, the streets of London, Windsor, Manchester, and Edinburgh erupted into something far different. Some of the largest protests the country has seen in years. Giant banners declaring Trump not welcome stretched across bridges. A massive inflatable caricature balloon hovered over crowds, mocking the former U.S. president. And as Trump dined with King Charles and posed with Prime Minister Keir Starmer, outside the palace walls, ordinary people chanted, screamed, and projected images of Trump's scandals across the night sky. This was not a quiet state visit. It was a confrontation, and one that threatens to leave scars on Starmer's government for months to come. The energy was explosive from the very start. Just minutes after Trump's arrival, protesters had already filled Parliament Square, Trafalgar Square, and Whitehall. The chants of "Dump Trump," "No to Racism," and "Justice for Palestine" could be heard from blocks away. Outside Windsor Castle, a coalition of activists set up high-powered projectors, beaming disturbing images onto the walls. Trump alongside Jeffrey Epstein, Trump with slogans about fascism and corruption. Police moved quickly to intervene, warning that these projections crossed into malicious communication. 4 people were arrested, but by then the images had already gone viral, seen by millions across social media. The symbolism was clear. No matter what the government tried to stage inside gilded halls, the streets were writing their own narrative. Inside Windsor, the atmosphere could not have been more different. State banquets, military bands, the glitter of royal ceremony. Trump smiled broadly as he shook hands with King Charles III, praised Britain as America's eternal ally, and boasted of a $150 billion investment package tied to U.S. firms. Prime Minister Starmer stood beside him, eager to present this as a triumph. Britain back at the center of world diplomacy, America's closest partner, a global hub for business and innovation. For Starmer, who has promised serious, grown-up politics after years of instability, this was supposed to be his moment on the world stage. But the problem is this. Outside those banquet halls, Britain was already asking whether the cost of that handshake was too high. The backlash came not only from activists but also from mainstream political voices. The Liberal Democrats boycotted the state dinner. Several Labour MPs refused invitations, publicly stating they would not normalize Trump's record. Welsh First Minister Vaughan Gething openly criticized the event, while Scottish leaders said Trump's presence risked inflaming division. Even members within Starmer's own party privately admitted the optics were disastrous, aligning with Trump at a time when his positions on immigration, climate, and foreign policy remained deeply controversial. Critics pointed to Trump's calls to use military force against illegal immigration, his dismissal of climate change, and his refusal to support Palestinian statehood as examples of values Britain should not endorse. Yet here he was, honored with royal ceremony, while protesters were kettled by police outside. The government tried to defend itself by emphasizing the economic wins. Officials highlighted new tech investments, partnerships with U.S. energy firms, and commitments to joint defense projects. Starmer argued that diplomacy means engaging with difficult partners, not just easy ones. But the more he spoke, the more the protests grew. For the British public, this wasn't only about economics. It was about morality, about identity, about what Britain stands for in the world. The images of Trump laughing at banquets while protesters were dragged away in handcuffs created a split-screen effect that no amount of investment figures could erase. This was not the first time Britain had protested Trump. Back in 2018 and 2019, his visits sparked outrage too. But those were during conservative governments under Theresa May and Boris Johnson, who were already seen as aligned with Trump's worldview. This time was different. This was a Labour Prime Minister, a man who built his reputation on human rights law, who campaigned on restoring trust and integrity, now giving Trump the highest honors a foreign leader can receive. For many voters, especially younger and progressive ones, this felt like a betrayal. And that's why the protests were not just loud, they were massive. Organizers claim over 300,000 people took to the streets nationwide, dwarfing numbers seen in past demonstrations. The protests themselves were a patchwork of causes and voices. Anti-racism groups marched beside climate activists. Trade unions carried banners demanding workers' rights. Palestinian flags flew alongside signs reading, "No to Fascism." What united them was not a single issue but a single message. Donald Trump does not represent the values they want Britain to honor. And when Starmer chose to welcome him with state honors, he became part of that message too. The backlash was no longer just against Trump, it was against Starmer himself. As the visit continued, tensions only escalated. In Manchester, protesters blocked roads leading to Trump's motorcade, forcing police to reroute traffic. In Edinburgh, thousands gathered outside the U.S. consulate, chanting late into the night. In London, scuffles broke out as counter-protesters waving British and American flags clashed with anti-Trump demonstrators. Police reported over 70 arrests across the country, with dozens injured in clashes. These were not isolated pockets of dissent. They were nationwide eruptions, timed to coincide with every step of Trump's itinerary. Meanwhile, Trump seemed unfazed. At a joint press conference, he brushed off the protests as fake news stunts and praised Starmer as a tough negotiator who knows how to make deals. He dismissed questions about the projections at Windsor, claiming the arrests showed Britain won't tolerate left-wing harassment. For his supporters, these words were fuel. For his critics, they were gasoline on the fire. The more Trump spoke, the louder the protests became. Starmer, for his part, tried to walk a fine line. He defended the right to protest but condemned the projections as malicious. He praised the investment package while acknowledging differences of opinion with Trump. But this balancing act satisfied no one. To protesters, he looked complicit. To conservatives, he looked weak. To the international audience, he looked caught in the middle. And perhaps he was. But in politics, perception matters more than intention. And the perception of this visit is already shaping into one of division and backlash. Now, the fallout begins. Starmer faces questions from his own MPs, from the media, from the public. Did he miscalculate the depth of opposition to Trump? Did he underestimate the anger of his base? And will the economic gains of this visit outweigh the political costs? These are not easy questions, and the answers will not come quickly. What is certain is that this visit has forced Britain to confront itself. What does it stand for? Who does it honor? And at what price? The images from this week will linger. The blimp floating above Westminster. The projections scrawled across Windsor Castle. The chants of hundreds of thousands drowning out the sound of trumpets and royal salutes. The sight of Starmer standing beside Trump, smiling for cameras while outside his name was chanted in anger. These are not images that fade easily. They become part of history, part of narrative, part of the story Britain tells itself about this moment. And as Trump departs, boarding his plane with a smile and a wave, the protests do not end. Organizers are already planning follow-up marches. Activist groups are demanding inquiries into police tactics, into the arrests, into why public anger was treated as a security threat instead of a democratic right. Starmer, meanwhile, must return to Parliament and face not only questions from the opposition but unease from within his own party. This visit may have been meant to show strength on the world stage, but domestically, it has exposed vulnerabilities that could haunt him for years. So where does Britain go from here? Will the economic deals signed this week be remembered as the foundation of a new era? Or will they be overshadowed by the images of dissent? Will Starmer's gamble on Trump pay off, or will it erode the trust of the very voters who brought him to power? These are the stakes, and they remain unresolved. One thing is clear. This was not just a diplomatic visit. It was a collision of values, a battle over identity, and a test of leadership under pressure. And for Britain, the consequences are only beginning. Stay tuned, because the protests may be over for now, but the political storm they unleashed has only just begun.